Hello, this is Dempsey Craft. I'm presenting as a part of my Fundamentals of Homeland Security course, and this is going to be for my final presentation for my final paper. And the subject I chose to go over is Homeland Security Organizational Structure Review. There's been a lot of interest on my part to look and see if the current Homeland Security organizational structure at the federal level is adequate to meet the missional requirements for Homeland Security. So as introduction, as most people know, after September 11th, 2001, Homeland Security became a primary focus of the federal government. After 9/11, the United States established both the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. intelligence community. The founding of the Department of Homeland Security was the largest restructure of the federal government since before. The last time there was a large restructure was after World War II with the establishment of the Department of Justice. And so with the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, brought together 22 agencies of the federal government into a single agency, and with the goal to secure the homeland of the United States. One of the issues that I have found in the literature is that there is some disagreement about what the best way to structure the United States Homeland Security programs, and so that's the problem that we're going to look at for this paper and this literature review. The structure of Homeland Security is significant to emergency management and Homeland Security because the federal Homeland Security policies influence policies all the way down to the local level, the state, local, tribal, and territory level. States have very different approaches to emergency management and Homeland Security. Some states divide these functions, such as Hawaii, who has two different offices, one for emergency management and one for Homeland Security. The state of Washington actually includes their emergency management and Homeland Security in the state's military branch with the National Guard. And then other states, such as Oklahoma, have brought both their emergency management and Homeland Security functions and departments into a single agency following the guidance of the federal government. So there is much disagreement and much confusion across the different levels of government about what is the best structural organization for Homeland Security. For this paper, it's going to be generally a literature review, and we're going to go over the 5 areas that I have listed there. Homeland Security definition, try to see what the literature says about that. We're going to review the different policies at the federal level that drive Homeland Security. We're going to look at the current Homeland Security organizational structure at the federal level. Then we're going to look at 2 different approaches to Homeland Security, the hierarchical approach and the networking approach. And then once we look at the literature, we're going to give some recommendations. I'll give some recommendations based on that literature, and they'll end up with a conclusion. So let's move on to the literature review. So for this literature review, I used the Arkansas Tech University Library, the online version of that, and went through many different databases. You see a couple listed there. And I gave special preference to peer-reviewed articles, specifically after 2011. The terms that I used to search was obviously Homeland Security, comprehensive Homeland Security, restructure, policy, organization. Had read previously that there had been some recommendations to put FEMA at a cabinet level position, so I used that, and then different variations of all those. So we're going to go through those. You can see those there, and we will go through the different subjects that I listed earlier as far as the literature review. So the first part of the literature review, we looked at Homeland Security definition. So starting off, most of the literature says that most Homeland Security stakeholders at all levels of the government agree that Homeland Security should include stakeholder coordination to minimize fatalities, limit damage to infrastructure, minimize impact to the public, and protect civil liberties, and minimize economic impacts. So with those agreements in place, the disagreement comes in how that actually works itself out. At the federal level, emergency management and Homeland Security is actually divided. So the Department of Homeland Security has focused and continues to focus primarily on terrorism. And FEMA, which is a part of Department of Homeland Security, focuses on natural disasters. And while some of the literature did point out that because FEMA is a part of DHS, that DHS does have an all hazards approach. However, DHS, the organization, does make a focus on terrorism and usually gives FEMA the go ahead to lead the way on natural disasters. In contrast, at local level, emergency management and Homeland Security is seen as an all hazards approach. So it doesn't matter if it's a natural disaster, it doesn't matter if it's a man-made disaster, if it's on purpose, if it's terrorism, if it's a technological disaster. Because local emergency management and Homeland Security is usually conducted by smaller departments, they have to look at it as an all hazards approach. And so while there's agreement among the literature and among practitioners about what Homeland Security should do, there's disagreement about how it should function itself out. The next section of the literature review, we looked at Homeland Security policies. So as previously stated, after 9/11, that's when Homeland Security got a big boost on the federal level, and that came primarily from the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which created DHS. Following that, there was the 9/11 Commission Report. And from the 9/11 Commission Report, there were many recommendations, one of which was to create a network of intelligence agencies to collaborate together to gather intelligence and disseminate intelligence. And from that came the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, which created the United States intelligence community. Following that, after Hurricane Katrina happened, there was obvious shortfalls from the national response to Hurricane Katrina. Now, there's a lot of disagreement whether that is DHS's fault, or if that was FEMA's fault, or if that was the state's fault or the city's fault. Even so, the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act was passed, and it established the DHS Surge Capacity Force, which basically brought together all of DHS's functions, not just FEMA, to be able to respond to natural disasters. Finally, the DHS Strategic Plan, they have one of those every 4 years, and currently they're in the Strategic Plan for fiscal year 2020 and 2024. This plan sets out the current organizational structure for DHS, as well as missions with strategic objectives and metrics for those objectives. So Homeland Security structure at the federal level is in some ways complex, in some ways simple. The simple part of it is the Department of Homeland Security, which you can see in organizational structure right there. Under that, there's 3 branches: the Office of the Secretary, the Operational Functions, and the Support Functions. Primarily, the operational functions are made up of 9 different agencies, including FEMA, the United States Coast Guard, and TSA, and others. And the mission of DHS is primarily carried out by those 9 agencies within the operational functions. The other branches support those operational functions. So the Department of Homeland Security does have a fairly structured and strict organizational structure. But on the right, you can see the seal for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And that's there because the intelligence community is also part of Homeland Security, and that is not as structured. It's much more of a network approach to Homeland Security with many different agencies. Last count, I believe, was 18 different agencies that come together to share intelligence in order to maintain national security. So in that organizational structure, and the literature supported that there are 2 main approaches to Homeland Security at the federal level. There's the hierarchical approach and the networking approach. The hierarchical approach is far more strict. It was established by the Homeland Security Act with the strict organizational structure of DHS. Furthermore, there's been many Homeland Security secretaries that have advocated for establishing a, quote, one DHS. A one DHS would bring together all agencies at the federal level, excluding the military branches, into a single Homeland Security agency. That's all the agencies that have a national security function. But there's some researchers that take it even further and recommend bringing everything, including military branches that have to do with national security, into a single Homeland Security Protection Force. This would be another restructure similar to when DHS was established to bring together all agencies, including the military, that are at the national level together to function together for Homeland Security. Furthermore, there's been some senators recently that have advocated for abolishing FEMA altogether and absorbing its functions into DHS. For the networking approach, there is articles and literature that recommend or that indicates that the intent of the 9/11 Commission was not to create a strict Homeland Security structure at the federal level, but more of a network approach to it, similar to the United States intelligence community. Furthermore, there's articles that make many recommendations to reinstate FEMA at a cabinet level agency like it was before 9/11. And the argument there is that DHS is best served whenever it functions for protecting the nation from terrorism primarily, and FEMA is better suited for disaster response. Then we also have the Quadrennial Homeland Security Review. So every 4 years, there's a congressional review of the Homeland Security enterprise. And the Homeland Security enterprise in and of itself is implies a networking approach to Homeland Security. And the Quadrennial Homeland Security Review is established by the Homeland Security Act. So there's big difference among the literature and among the policies between what's the best approach, hierarchical approach or a networking approach towards Homeland Security at the federal level. So after reviewing the literature, my recommendation is that there should be a hybrid approach to Homeland Security. Right now, there is somewhat of a hybrid approach to Homeland Security, with both DHS being a very structured hierarchical approach and the intelligence community being more of a networking approach. My recommendation is for them to continue that hybrid approach, but also to establish regional DHS offices based on the FEMA regions that you see there. One of the big things that the literature pointed out that's a shortfall of DHS is that it does not engage the local stakeholders. FEMA, on the other hand, does engage, and primarily that engagement is because they have regional offices where they are, part of their mission is to engage with the states, the locals, the tribes, and the territories. And so by establishing regional DHS offices based on the FEMA regions, the DHS could increase their stakeholder engagement. So in conclusion, comprehensive Homeland Security, that is the goal of the United States Homeland Security. It's the mission, but it can only be accomplished through interagency coordination. The recommendation that I have given is for a hybrid approach to Homeland Security structure, where hierarchical and networking approaches, the benefits of both should be utilized so that the U.S. Homeland Security community can embrace the locals but also maintain a strong chain of command and span of control. Additionally, recommend that regional DHS offices be established based on the FEMA regions to increase local stakeholder engagement. Here are the references that I used. And that's my presentation. Thank you, and I hope this was informative.